Welcome back. So Danielle, tell me how, you've got these incredible reviews, as I mentioned earlier. Everyone's written about you, Time Magazine, New Yorker, New York Times, I mean, you name it and you're there. I haven't really seen a Pakistani author get this kind of a response with the first book. And some of them have been very good. Mohsin Hamid is very good, but he did, you have a good publicist.
Yeah, I do actually. That's the first thing I did actually when I hired a publicist.
Really?
Well, it's just like making, growing potatoes. You got to sell them.
Pakistan needs to get a publicist. I think you should recommend yours to
Exactly.
Pakistan.
No, but there's two parts to writing. One is writing the book, and that's your solitary little labor, and then the second part is sort of selling it, and that's why I'm here. And that's what the publicist does, and you have to do it. I mean,
we're not selling his book, by the way.
You're not.
We're just telling you to read. No. How did it feel? I mean, to have this kind of publicity. You're
bizarre.
famous.
It's completely unexpected. And my agent is this sort of guy who's very much a hands-off guy. So I hired him, and then I didn't hear from him for like 8 months. And I was on the point of sort of thinking maybe I should fire him and hire somebody else. And then he sends me this very laconic email in which there was nothing in the body. What it had was the heading. It said, New Yorker buys so-and-so, the story. So then my wife and I, we were at the farm, we were sitting there saying, is this the New Yorker? Is it another New Yorker?
Oh, is this a New Yorker? I'm a New Yorker,
Some New Yorker. So he's one who's managed this all. He and my publicist, and it's just sort of happened to me, and it's incredible.
Yeah. So, and have you done interviews, with the media? Have you talked to the press?
Just started doing that, and I was at this Jaipur Literary Festival, so I did a bunch of it then, and so sort of getting into the rhythm of it now. And I'm going to America in a few days, and then I'll be doing a big tour there.
A big tour in the States to promote the book.
Promote the book.
Are you doing a tour in Pakistan to promote the book?
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah, I am. Yeah, I am doing that.
Because your publicist in Pakistan is a rather tenacious young woman who's done really well.
I gather.
No, she's
Aisha
great.
Raja.
Yeah, she's fantastic. And what I like about what she's doing is she's getting people to love books and read them.
Well, that's
and
good.
People don't read here anymore.
That's not true, though. I've been so impressed always by how much Pakistanis do read.
Do they? But younger people? Do you find younger people are reading?
You meet a lot. What I would say is that I've met a lot of people who read pretty seriously in Pakistan. I mean,
but what's the demographic?
I don't know. I'm thinking of, I guess my parents' friends mostly.
But that's much older.
Yeah, much older. Younger people, I don't know who I know that reads. Well, my nephew reads. And I know people who read. People do read.
Okay, because according to statistics, younger people don't read much, and you look at bookshops, they're closing down and stuff like that. And now with this whole new growth and mushrooming of authors from the subcontinent, and a lot of authors from Pakistan now.
Yeah.
You've got people like Kamla Shamsi and Mohsin Hamid and who are writing books. And because of that, I think that, there may be an interest. And I think they're also focusing on younger people and appealing to them. But your book is really set back a little in time,
It's I think mine is less sort of what's the word? The voice is kind of it's not hip and young.
It's not
then maybe I'm not either.
But you don't read hip and young books, that's
true.
why.
That's the problem. Damn it.
Oh no, you've got to get you hip and young. But not even the e-parties and things, they're not hip and young?
I guess, I don't know.
Oh God, that's not good. But so the rave reviews, highly unusual, but how's it going to, obviously you'll sell really well in the States with those kind of reviews and things.
Right.
But what about here? I mean, are you looking at maybe translating the book into Urdu? Or?
I don't know. My publisher, my Indian publisher, sent me an email suggesting that it be translated. And I suppose it would be a good thing. I find...
How much control could you have over translation? I mean, how fluent are you?
I'm fluent. I speak Urdu and Punjabi, but I don't read it very fluently.
Okay.
And I certainly wouldn't be able to translate it myself. But it's an interesting question. I mean, do you really want to be, known do I really want to be prominent in that way in Pakistan? I'm not sure I do. Although
because
coming on TV is probably not helping.
That's all right. Nobody watches. No, they're all watching the cartoon channel. This is serious stuff. Especially people who matter. They're watching the cartoon channel. But if look, what you said was that you had this Western mindset. You were writing this book with a Western mindset. You were because you were thinking of your audiences in the West. So I was just thinking that if you were to translate it, would something get lost in translation?
Well, I think there's no such thing as translation. I mean, it's a reimagining.
Rewriting.
It's a rewriting. I mean, there is no such thing as translation.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot is lost whenever you do try to translate anything.
And it's the translator putting his own or her own.
Exactly.
Thoughts.
But I'd be curious to see what the reaction would be. I don't know what people would make of all this.
Well, would you like to? Do you think it would be an interesting experiment, or would you want to wait for a second book?
I think I'm perfectly willing to wait on that one.
Are you thinking of writing a second book?
I am writing one. I'm in the sort of just begun a novel.
And where's that set?
In Pakistan.
In Pakistan as well.
In fact, it sort of continues some of the same characters here.
Okay.
The story you read about In Other Rooms Are the Wonders,
Yeah.
that I'm determined to give the title character a second life. She's going to be apotheosized.
Husna is coming back.
Husna is going to be back.
Husna's back.
Who's going back? Exactly.
So what's Husna going to do then?
I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet, but I think she should get some sort of something good should happen to her.
Yeah.
She should become rich or famous or something.
And have a revenge on
Exactly, and have a revenge.
on the snotty upper classes.
Exactly.
You know, who consigned her to a life of lowliness. But it's this inbred snobbery. I mean, she had it as well because, she came from an affluent family that had sort of sold all its wealth and reduced itself to nothing because it did nothing with its money. But she had that snobbery herself.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
She had
That's why she wanted to climb, I mean, one of the things that I find interesting is that, I mean, a lot of these characters in this book are trying to rise, and I'm always amazed. I was thinking about this today, actually, that what I find remarkable is to the extent to which people in Pakistan, like, for example, the people on my farm, they're so conservative that they really don't have these aspirations. If they have these very small, sort of limited, I mean, they're conservative in a really fundamental way. And what I love about
even the aspirations are conservative.
I think so, yeah. I mean, just because if you stick your neck out, you might get your head chopped off. What I find it amazing, for example, that somebody who's been, doing something the same way. His grandfather did it that way. He's carrying bricks from point A to point B. His grandfather did it. His father did it, and he's doing it. And if you suggest to him, "Hey, wouldn't it be easier if you put this on a wheelbarrow?" He'll resist that.
But people always resist change. Change is something that scares people, so they tend to resist change.
But I think that the more desperate the situation is, the more resistant people are to change.
But is it a lack of education?
No, I think it's that when you've been brought up in a place where your life is, you're living at the edge. If you make a risky choice and it turns out to be a wrong choice, you could lose everything you have. So it's better to be safe and just say, okay, fine, I'll carry the bricks the same way my grandfather carried it because he made a living and my father made a living. Who knows what will happen if I start carrying them on a wheelbarrow?
Yeah, I might break them while unstacking
Yeah, exactly.
them.
Whatever, something could happen. One of the things I like about some of the characters in this book is that they're taking risks. They're trying to change, and then of course, as people have pointed out in a lot of these stories, they take a risk and then they end up sort of losing it. So they're not very cheery.
Sounds like Wall Street and everything that's been happening today. No, but you talked about the guy who's carrying the bricks and he won't shift to a wheelbarrow. He'll carry them the way his grandfather and his grandfather before him and all that. Well, there's a comfort in that, in the sense of the tradition.
Yeah.
And that if you take it from point A to point B, it's going to arrive safely, whereas the wheelbarrow may let you down.
Right.
But if you have an education, then your whole
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
You may even be susceptible to change if you're educated. You may be willing to change. You may be willing to experiment, to risk, to take chances.
Absolutely.
And because you can make calculated risks also,
exactly.
choices, and see that you may treble your income as opposed to losing it completely.
Right.
But it really boils down then to education and opportunity and things like that. Because you said, people are trying to rise, but sometimes they try to rise above themselves, and that could be a problem. I know it sounds terrible what I just said, but that can be a problem because they don't have the tools.
Yeah, there's a lovely aphorism which says that you should clip the wings of your hopes the way you clip the wings of domestic fowl so that they don't fly over the wall.
Oh my God, domestic fowls don't fly over the wall and birds in cages. But we're going to take a short break. We'll be back, so clip your wings. Stay with us.